Right, ladies and gentlemen, can I ask you to please take your seats? And I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's special council meetings. There are two of you, two council meetings tonight. We'll start off with apologies for absence. John?
Councillor Hunter Jarvie.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr Mayor, Councillor Janice Birch, Councillor Rhiannon Birch, Councillor Kate Edmonds and Councillor Chris Elmore.
And I've also had one apology from Adam Riley, who is on his way back from London, I believe, and will be trying to arrive as quickly as possible. Okay?
Sorry, apologies from Councillor Keith Hatton. I believe Councillor William is on his way.
Thank you. Item 2 then is to hear the roll call of members and declarations of interest.
Councillor Anthony Bennett. Councillor Richard Burton. Oh, she's not on yet.
Okay.
Councillor Julie Aviett. Councillor Jonathan Bird. Councillor Bronwyn Brooks. Councillor Liz Burnett. Councillor Jeff Cox. Councillor Claire Curtis. Councillor Pamela Drake. Councillor John Drysdale. Councillor Stuart Egan.
Present and nothing to declare.
Councillor Chris Franks. Councillor Eric Hacker. Councillor Howard Hamilton. Councillor Val Hartree. Councillor Nick Hodges. Councillor Jeff James. Councillor Gwyn John. Councillor Fred Johnson. Councillor Ian Johnson. Councillor Maureen Kelly Owen. Councillor Peter King. Councillor Kevin Marnie. Councillor Ann Moore. Councillor Neil Moore. Councillor Andrew Parker. Councillor Bob Penrose. Councillor Anthony Powell.
Present, I would like to declare an interest in agenda item 3, the city deal proposal, as my daughter is an employee of Aviva Trains Wales. I do not have dispensation and I will leave the room.
Councillor Audrey Preston. Councillor Rhona Probert. Councillor Gwyn Roberts. Councillor John Thomas. Councillor Ray Thomas. Councillor Rodri Traherne. Councillor Stefan William. Councillor Margaret Wilkinson. Councillor Clive Williams. Councillor Chris Williams. Councillor Eddie Williams.
Present and nothing to declare.
And Councillor Mark Wilson.
That brings us on then to item 3, which is the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal Proposal. Leader.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And can I thank the Managing Director to start with for the presentation that he gave earlier to some of the members, and can I also thank some of the members who were here. We had a good question and answer session. In terms of the report, the purpose of the report is to update members on the progress being made in the formal establishment of the Cardiff Capital Region Joint Committee and to seek approval for the establishment of that joint committee tonight. The report also seeks approval of a suite of documents attached to this report, which are required to establish the Cardiff Capital Region Joint Committee and the City Deal investment. In light of some of the things that's been said, I will go through the report, and I apologise for that, but I think we need to do that in order for everybody to be very well aware of the report that's been asked of us tonight. But more particularly, I know that some members weren't able to join us earlier, so maybe they would need some of the information too. I'd like to start by actually reading out the recommendations, and when I do so, what I'm going to do is also refer to the paragraphs in the report to which they refer, so that if anybody has any indication, then they can itself look at those as I make them plain. And then I will go through the report in some I'll try and appreciate as much as I possibly can, because I know that members have had the opportunity of reading the report over the last week or so. The first one, recommendation the Council has been asked to approve, is the Joint Working Agreement, which is commonly known as JWA, as the legal agreement that formally establishes the Cardiff Capital Region, also known as the CCR Joint Committee, which is the regional cabinet as a joint committee with delegated functions, with the commencement date of the 1st of March 2017. The elected members, representative on the regional cabinet, shall be the leader of the council, with the deputy leader as a nominated deputy. If you wish to find any of the information in relation to that, that's on paragraph 53 and 56 of the report. Recommendation 2 approves the financial contributions from each constituent council towards the collective £120 million total, together with such associated costs, for example, carry costs, and again as detailed in the reports, and I would refer you to paragraph 45. In terms of 3, approves the carry forward of any remaining revenue funds from 16-17 contributed by each constituent council into 2017-18 in order to support structure for the joint committees. If you recall, we'd already put forward £42,000 each from this council as our proportion, and another one shortly, so that anything that's left can actually be wired forward. That is on paragraph 39. 4, we approve the collective revenue contribution of up to £1 million, inclusive of recommendation 3 above, on a proportionate basis, as set out in the JWA, and the proportional basis is each of the constituent authorities will pay a proportion according to their population. So as set out in the JWA to the 17-18 budget in order to support the structure for the joint committee continues. That's on paragraph 39 too. In terms of recommendation 5, that approves the City of Cardiff acting as the accountable body with the responsibility as set out in the JWA, again set out on paragraph 54. The sixth recommendation is to approve the assurance framework as an open and transparent and robust decision-making process for considering all the proposals requiring to support from the CCR City Deal Wider Investment Fund. That's to ensure that everything is robust and clearly checked before anything goes forward. That again is on paragraph 33, but also contained in Schedule 8 of the JWA. Recommendation 7 approves the implementation plan in the form attached to the JWA, but that's subject to each constituent authority approving the JWA business plan, which is what we intend or hope to do this evening. Again, you will find that in paragraph 35 and Schedule 9. Recommendation 8 gives some delegation, and the Managing Director, in consultation with the Leader of the Council, the Head of Legal Paid Service and the Section 15 Officer, be granted delegated authority to agree such amendments as are necessary to the JWA assurance framework and intermediate plan as are appropriate from the date of acceptance of these recommendations to the commencement date of the 1st of March 2017. Clearly, if there are any changes before, and there would be minor, before the signing date, and I'll give you one example, is that if you look in the JWA, it says in the appendix there's a Schedule 10. In fact, there might have been, but there isn't anymore, even though it's in the document that you have before you. So, small things like that. Item 9 It would appear to be a redundant recommendation, bearing in mind that all the other 9 authorities have signed up to the agreement. But I think for consistency, as we've all done it, that I was also moved at recommendation 9, that the Managing Director, in consultation with the leader of the Council, the Head of Legal Service, and Section 15 Officer, be granted delegated authority to decide whether the Council should continue to explore the opportunity to participate in the CCR City deal in the event that 1 or more of the 10 constituent councils fail to agree any recommendations of 1 to 7 above. As I say, I think that's not going to be the case, but belt and braces. Recommendation 10, that the leader of the council or his nominated deputy, in this case would be the deputy leader, be granted delegated authority to sign the JWA on behalf of the council. And again, I wanted to do that first because then we know exactly where we are, and it sets a scene for where we are. In terms of the situation itself, some history really. The Council Cabinet on the 22nd of February 2016 looked at the Council, the premise of a city deal, Cardiff Capital Regional City deal, and indeed talked about whether we agreed some terms of heads of terms agreement. That was then taken to the Council on the 2nd of March 2016, and indeed the agreement and the heads of terms was signed on the 15th of March 2016 by the then leaders of the 10 authorities, which is obviously the authorities are the 10 local authorities in South East Wales, from Bridgend to Monmouth, from the Vale to Merthyr. So it was signed by the 10 leaders with the representatives of the Welsh Government, the UK Government, and therefore we were set to work. In summary, the city deal heads of terms agreement include those things which are contained in paragraph 5 of the report. Primary heads are 1.229 billion investment in the Cardiff Capital region's infrastructure, connecting the region with the creation of a new non-statutory regional transport authority, supporting the innovation and improvement for digital network, developing a skilled workforce and tackling unemployment, supporting enterprise and business growth, housing development and regeneration. So they're the primary and the summary areas of the heads of terms, but there were some small, they said small number, but very key and very pertinent targets. Because the whole purpose of this is a 20-year program, and it hopes to create 25,000 new jobs by 2036. By levering in also an additional £4 billion of private sector investment as a result of the 1.229 billion public sector investment that makes up the city deal. And the heads of terms agreement at Schedule 7, which is in the JWA, on page 46, talks about certain areas of establishing governance and a governance model which complies with the existing statutory frameworks, in other words, a joint committee. It would strengthen and streamline the existing governance on partnership arrangements already in place. But as you all know, we've always worked as a region particularly closely. We used to have the South East Wales Partnership Group. We've had CETA. We've had all sorts of things. We also think that the targets are to improve the business involvement in the area. But most importantly, I think it also provides confidence and assurance to both the UK and the Welsh Government that local authority leaders are making collective decisions which will serve to drive the economy growth across the capital region. That's something which we had to show was positive. UK Government, I think, initially were sceptical of whether or not 10 local authorities could work together, 10 local authority leaders could work together, but I think we've proved that to be the case, and we've also proved it to be the case that not only can we work together, we can work with the UK and we can work with the Welsh Government too. The reason we want to do that is it enables the local authorities to explore with the Welsh Government alternative governance arrangements in the medium term if necessary. And the reason that that was put in there originally was because this was before the May elections. It was where we were had some uncertainty about where we were in the world, whether or not there was going to be local government reform in a way that Leighton Andrews had put together in his white paper. But clearly now we know that there are 22 local authorities within Wales, and that's where it's going to stay for some considerable time. The Heads of Terms Agreement also established the Capital Regional Cabinet, and it has a participation of the 10 authorities, and they would be there to provide the basis for initial decision making regarding the investment fund. And those Heads of Terms would show that the Cabinet would be responsible for those issues that are listed on paragraph 8, which is the management of the investment fund, looking at any additional devolved funding should it come, looking at the Transport Authority, as I said, setting up a Transport Authority, contracting with, more particularly, Transport Wales on prioritising metro projects. I know something that's in some people's minds of how we're going to do it. It actually says that we will work with Welsh Government and the Transport for Wales in order to do that. We hope that another area is to have business rate income, to look at any devolving business income above any agreed growth, which was agreed within the Heads of Terms, but obviously that's subject to any Welsh Government agreement. In other words, if after we do this we have more business rates, then we should be having some of the income from that too. Talked about strategic planning in terms of housing, transport planning and land use, influencing skills and worklessness and programmes to ensure that we get more people into work, which is the whole strategy of it, and considering the scope for strengthening the capital region work. Since the signing, people think nothing has happened, but a great deal of work has gone on. There's been progressing of work in order to look at the governance arrangements for the 1.229 billion investment fund. And there are two distinct elements, and I think people need to be aware of the two distinct elements. There's the £734 million metro scheme, which is a scheme which is in place through collaboration with the Welsh Government and UK Government. There's going to be £503 million Welsh Government funding for the first 7 years. That would also have UK Government support of £125 million from the UK, but more importantly, would also have £106 million from the European Development Fund, which is committed. And I think the important point about this in the metro scheme is that that formed a primary role of the city deal itself, with the UK Government insisting that there would be investment from Welsh Government, and therefore they agreed that they would work in collaboration with them in order to fund that. It's also important to realise that the £734 million in terms of the metro will be a direct responsibility of the Welsh Government, albeit, as I said earlier, and within the Regional Transport Authority we will have influence. We will be able to talk to Welsh Government, because that's fundamental in terms of the metro going forward. The other fund is the £495 million Regional Capital Fund, and that's the important one to us in some respects. That is a commitment of if we agree tonight, of the 10 local authorities to borrow £120 million over a 20-year period. But if we do that, then there will, together with that, will be a £375 million funding from the UK Government. And that investment and that element of the city deal is a responsibility of the Cardiff Capital Regional Cabinet, which is commonly known as the Joint Committee. So there's lots of things being done. We set up a shadow cabinet, and that was established in the summer of 2016. We've part of the agreement says you needed to have a project management officer. We've appointed a program director and project manager. We've worked with external legal support, and we've also appointed some media support too, in order to move us forward. And that's all part of the JWA at Appendix A. We've also set up, in the medium term, I know Cabinet member is on it, is the Shadow Regional Transport Authority, and that has already been established. But should we all agree to the deal today, then that would come into its formalised role. And indeed, this is why I said we do have a responsibility, because there will be responsibility for pooled local transport resources. They will look at the regional planning and local transport networks, so in other words, working with Welsh Government. Working again with Transport Wales, as I said, creating of a single integrated ticket platform for public support across the Cardiff capital region. Indeed, that's one of the most important facts as far as I'm concerned, is that it's right that if somebody's travelling on public transport, they can have a ticket, they can get on a bus, they can go to the train station, they can go on the train, they can get back off train, go on another bus. Integrated ticketing, I think, is the only way it's going to work. Again, working in partnership with the Welsh Government to define the priorities of the South East Wales Metro and support its delivery, but more particularly working, and somebody asked this earlier on, is what do we get out of it? Where are we in this? Clearly, it isn't a case of what do we get out of it, it's what the region gets out of it, but it's important to emphasise that working in partnership with the Welsh Government to promote the development of the integrated aviation routes from Cardiff Airport and the St Athan Enterprise Zone to deliver economic benefits. That is something which is crucial to us, I think. What we will also do, because we need to do that, is to set up a capital regional economic growth partnership, which will help to assist the development of the wider city region. Again, it's part of the JWA. We will appoint an independent person that would be appointed in early 2017 to lead that process. And indeed, we also, one of the things that we wanted to do was continue something which is been going for some time, the Learning Skills Innovation Partnership, for example, and relaunch the Cardiff Capital Region Skills and Employment Board. And that will have responsibilities for those things which are contained on paragraph 14, and I won't read those out. Another commitment is that we will set up a development of regional business organisation, because it's important that if we're going to have a development, if we're going to have investment, if we're going to have investment from the business sector, from not only public sector, we have to talk to and work with businesses across the region, and this is one body in which we want to move forward. We want to work with them to give them their head, let's put it that way, to work with us, and hopefully that will be set up in spring of 2017. What also was carried out initially, and a part of this report is Appendix B. One of the requirements was we had to set up an independent growth and competitive commission, which was chaired by Professor Greg Clark. It looked at findings over several months. It reported its findings on the 16th of December. And indeed, as I said, that's attached to Appendix B. Part of that report included recommendations in areas of economy, inclusion, spatial development, housing, economic regeneration, governance and leadership. And there's one of the recommendations, 13, is contained on paragraph 18. So, where are we now, I think, is the point. There are three specific requirements that are required of us, really. The first one is to establish, through the joint working agreement, a regional cabinet, and that's what we've been asked to do tonight. So it allows the current shadow regional cabinet to move out of shadow and therefore become official. As part of the JWA, we also formally approved the assurance framework, and as I said, the assurance framework is one where if any projects are coming forward, they have to go through that implementation scheme before they can get to the joint cabinet, and then it would form part of the business plan, which would then come to each of the constituent authorities, where each of the constituent authorities, and it's important to say this, would all have to agree that business plan. The joint working agreement also was a formal document in order to set up the joint committee. It's not something that's to establish governance arrangements. It's not something that's new. We know of it in things like the shared regulatory services. It's allowed under current legislation. We've agreed in that area to have a working of 10 authority representatives. Each authority would have one representative. Each authority would have one vote, no more. It doesn't matter what their population is, everybody would have one vote. There would be a quorum of 7, and any decisions would be made by a simple majority. Although I have to say, one of the things that has gone on in the shadow and shadow cabinet, joint cabinet, and has been agreed is that what we hope to do and intend to do is to agree anything by consensus. Their responsibilities will obviously be to look at any delegations within the joint committee, and only reserve matters some reserve matters which again contained within Schedule 1 of the of the JWA would come back to their respective councils for approval. 23 talks about one of the JWA. The decision-making process identifies 3 categories of decision-making: regional program director in consultation with the chairs and relevant portfolios. In other words, we can give some delegation to that particular officer, but they have to do it in delegation, in consultation with the chair of the joint committee and the portfolio holder. The joint committee is expected to have elected members from each council, as I said, and they will be able to make decisions. But then there's other things which are reserved to council. So everything's going to go to the joint committee. The joint committee business plan is something which is a high-level programme to be agreed within the next 12 months, and that shall include, amongst other things, indicative investment programme for the programme themes. It would update any affordable envelopes that are necessary, the methodology for agreeing the projects, etc. And also they would have to agree any increases in affordable envelope if that was the case. So basically there are 3 elements. One is approval and adoption of the JWA, which we're doing today. If necessary, agree any increase in the affordable envelope. Currently it stands in terms of us at a venture of £210,800,000, which, if you would then work out our share, which is 8.5% of the share, would be, over the 25 years, £17.9 million as it currently stands. The third element, but something which is not actually perceived to be the case, but something which was put in there just in case, was it would have to come back to council to approve any increases to the council's contribution above the £120 million. So basically what we're being asked to do is 3 things. 1, approve the JWA, which is what we're doing now. Agree the spending, which is the £120 million. And also, if necessary, we would be asked to approve any increases, but that's not the case at the moment. There are some caveats, and I have to say, and it would be wrong of me not to, it's important that in order to show an act of faith, I think in terms of this, is the UK government has agreed a discretion of £50 million from HMS Treasury to be funded into the scheme before the JWA business plan is up and running. As I said, the JWA business plan is something which we will be working on for the next 12 months and will come here for ratification and come to every authority for ratification. So what they've agreed to do is to have a sum of £50 million in that scheme and funded for the first 5 years of the UK government scheme. And that is the first lock-in period, if you want. They are prepared to do that before we get the business plan up and running, but clearly they expect us to have a business plan by a year. All the things within the business plan would be subject to the assurance framework, as I talked about before, and there would be associated evaluation. And therefore, within the JWA, if we agree to use any of that money, and it is a big if, but I hope we will, use some of that money, then we would still have the responsibility for 8.5% of that money, even if we didn't agree the joint work at the business plan, the JWA business plan, but I'm sure that we will. And it's important too that it's kind of on all fours with where the Cabinet Secretary, the Welsh Government Cabinet Secretary is at the moment in terms of local government reorganisation or local government reform, I should say. And where he's agreed to have the retention of the 22 authorities, but he's also provided in terms of the way he's worked and his ways he sees as going forward is to work on a regional basis. And I know that forms part of other parties' platforms too. So what this does, there's a risk. If we spent money and we didn't get the JWA business plan in, we would still be responsible for any amount of the 50 million we would be spending. Also, the agreement commits councillors to participation for a minimum of 5 years, so there is a lock-in period if we agree this. For the first 5 years, there is a lock-in period, so anything spent during the terms of the 5 years, we would be responsible for, and I think you should know that. If the business plan isn't approved, then, as I said before, we would still be locked in to that commitment. One of the things that was a requirement of the JWA and the agreement from Welsh Government and UK Government is that we have an accountable body. In other words, one of those 10 constituent authorities who would be accountable to administer the city deal, hold the funds from the UK Government and the Welsh Government and local government and other sources, and that accountable body would be responsible for the finance and legal compliances of the deal itself. What's been proposed is that Cardiff Council should be the accountable body, and they've agreed to that. Everybody's agreed that it was right and proper. They had the resources, the capability of doing it, but they would have to make sure that they acted diligently. They act as a primary interface between Welsh Government, local government, UK Government, European Development Fund. They also have to act as the accountable body to hold the funds. So that's kind of where we are with the JWA. As I said, the other part of it is the assurance framework. The assurance framework, as I remind you, applies to the 495 million investment fund. We also have the implementation plan, which is basically a plan with detailed work to be undertaken over the next 3 to 5 years before the first gateway kicks in. It sets out key milestones, activities against those gateway reviews, because every year, the first 5 years talked about 5 years, but every 5 years thereafter there will be gateway schemes, checks and balances, if you want, for that. So the implementation plan needs to go forward. Paragraph 37 talks about whether or not all authorities need to agree, because we all have to agree. We're the last ones in the line to do that. Currently, in terms of finance, as I said, we've put some money together in terms of £42,000 in July, and we've also increased that. And recommendation 4 agrees that we arrangements for 2017-18 is to increase that by another £42,000. So, and the other thing is that if there's any money available, because we spent some of it, if there's any other money available, it will go forward to next year. Need to flag the fact that this is the first city deal awarded to Wales. It's important, and I know it's been in lots of areas in the UK, in England. Scotland have a couple, but this is the first in Wales, and I think it's important that we move forward in terms of this. In terms of the body itself, as I said, it has 2 distinct elements, which I've told you about, and they're on paragraph 43, which is the Metro Scheme and the Regional Cabinet Fund, and I won't go over that. In terms of the funding, we know the funding commitment. The Section 15 officers have done a load of work in terms of potential scenarios, and basically they've looked that the scheme would cost 210.8 billion, of which 166.8 million is the estimated cost of local authorities. As I said, we have a proportional share in terms of population, and that would mean that we would have 8.5%, which is £17.5 million over 25 years. The reason it's 25 years is because the borrowing period is 20, but the payback period is 25. So just because I know I looked at it, thought when we were talking this originally, thought, where did we get the 2? But it's the payback period too. So as I say, basically £17.9 million. We need to evaluate the spending. There will be gateways between 5, 10 and 15 years, as I said. And in order to mitigate the risks, I know one of the members, Chris, was concerned about what schemes are coming forward, to the business plan. It has to go through the assurance framework. So in order for the business plan to come forward, just to make everybody absolutely clear, schemes would come forward. There would be, from each authority, we would put some in, others would put them in. It would go through the assurance framework. If that met the assurance framework, it would come back to the joint committee. If the joint committee thought that was the reason to go forward, it would then form part of the business plan, which comes to every constituent 10 authorities, and all have to agree it. So, as I said, legal implications, establishing a joint committee, the terms of reference are within the scheme itself. We talk about the JWA being legally constituted. There's recommendations on which you can find, and I told you about 53, 54 in terms of the joint working agreement itself. I made the point about one member, one vote. Chairing of the authority would be on a rotational basis too. And there's also an agreement that the chairman would not have a casting vote, and that's something we've all agreed, is that there would be no casting vote for the chair person. There are lock-in periods, as I said. You can withdraw, but if you withdraw, then you are responsible for the money that's been paid upfront. So you would be responsible for your share of anything that had been agreed during your tenure of office, is the best way of putting it, I think. As I said, there are some reserved matters which I've told you about. Told you about the money. In terms of scrutiny, which is another issue which I know that everybody's keen to know, what we considered is there should be could be consideration of a collaborative activities, either possibly a joint scrutiny committee in the future, or as a way forward, which is what we're doing at the moment with the other joint committees that we have, is that each authority would have their own scrutiny process. And in the fullness of time, I'm sure, I think it would be sensible, even if it's only on the odd occasion, to have a joint scrutiny with each of the 10 constituent authorities. So basically, what I'm asking Council to do, as I said, there's been a considerable amount of work that's gone into this since the original agreement and heads of terms was signed. I've read out the recommendations, so I think I just wanted to make sure that everybody was absolutely clear where we are. And if I bored you, I'm sorry, but I think you really needed to know. Everybody needs to know what we're signing ourselves up for, but I do recommend and endorse the recommendations.
Thank you, Leader. Seconded. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much for that detailed introduction, Councillor Moore, Leader. I'm afraid I missed the briefing earlier because there was an event with the Minister for Social Services and Public Health, so I'm very pleased that you've given us such a detailed introduction. However, I have some quite strong reservations about this scheme. It has a very grandiose title, and it makes the proponents make some very bold claims in there. It's a little bit boy who cried wolf, a little bit like the EU funding, Objective 1 funding, in terms of the impact that it will have, the substantive, transformative impact it will have. And I'm not sure the figures really bear that out. The £1.2 billion envelope being spent over 20 years is equivalent to less than 0.4% of the Welsh Government budget within that time. So I'm not quite sure that the transformative is necessarily what I would see from that. As the Leader says, there are two particular segments to the deal. The first is the £734 million of the Metro. Now, we all know that Wales has been underfunded in terms of its transport infrastructure for decades, if not generations. In fact, Barry Boy, Gwynfor Evans, first Plaid Cymru MP, asked questions about electrification back in the 1960s, 50 years ago. And we still are alongside Albania and Moldova without a mile of electrified line. I find it strange that this has come up in this format, not least because we previously had the South East Wales Transport Alliance, which was disbanded, and we weren't allowed as local council to talk about trains in the local transport plan. Electrification is important, but to try and claim a transformative effect for it for somewhere like the Vale of Glamorgan, I think can be slightly misleading. Especially if we look at the price tag on this. For example, the Cardiff area signalling renewal works that recently completed were around £300 million. This phase 2 of the Metro is £734 million. We've seen improvements, but have they really been transformative? Frankly, as a commuter, I think the most important thing for many people is the decency of the franchise, and the 2003 franchise with Arriva trains that led to no growth and no new stock is probably far more important than anything else. People want to be able to get to work and be able to sit down on their train. The £495 million investment fund is interesting. To some extent, I welcome it. £18 million from the Vale of Glamorgan. Again, though, it's not exactly huge in terms of its public sector investments. I mean, the amount of funding we would have to provide would start off at 0.4% of our annual budget. So, again, this is not huge. The total, if you took the purely the public sector investment of this, then the amount we would get would pay for half of a secondary school. So again, the transformative effect of this is not exactly gigantic. There are references to the £4 billion of private sector investment that will be leveraged as a result of this. I would be interested in more detail, much more detail of this, because an 8-to-1 ratio of investment between that public sector investment and the private sector investment there doesn't look particularly realistic to me. Either it will require fanciful accounting when it comes to gateway review stages, or frankly that public sector investment wasn't required and the private sector could have done it regardless. I would expect clarification on whether that £4 billion actually includes, the franchise or anything that's affected by the metro in terms of direct rail investments. Another figure that comes out in the papers is 25,000 jobs created over a 20-year period. That's an increase of 3.5% in the number of total jobs within the 10 council areas here. Again, under an orthodox economic outlook, that doesn't seem particularly fantastic. One thing I did note is the responsibility for housing and planning being transferred as part of this cabinet to the leaders of this authority. And I found it interesting to look at the Growth Commission's use of Welsh Government figures. The Growth Commission estimates a requirement for 7,200 houses over 20 years in the Vale of Glamorgan. That's 360 per year, and that's quite different to the 660 houses per year that are actually part of our local development plan. I must be honest, the idea of putting planning and housing in the hands of the people who have massively inflated the numbers of required housing in the Vale of Glamorgan is quite scary. Now, one of my problems with this, though, is that it does, as part of that, require a transfer of powers upwards from local authorities. I am not opposed to joint working or joint working models. I think they work very well in many places. However, I am concerned by the rush. I don't see why we need to contrive all of this in order to have a contrived photograph on the 1st of March at Cardiff Airport. When this was proposed to us last year in the meeting on I believe the 2nd of March, the leader told us that he anticipated it would take 18 to 24 months to come to fruition, yet we're being dragged back now to discuss this. This deal, if you ask me, lacks accountability to the public. It lacks a level of consultation, particularly around the elements of governance that lie behind it. Because while we've had a large discussion, I think, about the funding and about the supposed impacts of that funding, we've not discussed those powers and where they should be lying. Now, we had a long time in this place and in others discussing the proposals or mergers with Cardiff or with Bridgend. Yet this, I think, has really snuck up on us from behind. I'm aware of the situation as it comes to the votes. It's actually spelt out in recommendation 9, which essentially is that it's take it or leave it. Now, I don't like take it or leave it. I think they stink. We are signing up here for 25 years of payments and discussions. I think that all 10 councils should really have left this until after we'd had the elections in May, and then those people could have a mandate to do this, because that mandate does not exist with this council. Thank you very much. I would also like to ask for recorded votes on this matter as well. Thank you.
If people don't indicate that they want a recorded vote, there won't be one. That's fine. We will have a recorded vote. Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is with great reservation over the risks that I do have. I do have a lot of reservations, but the fact that we've been told that we can leave after 5 years gives me some great comfort, and I do feel that I could, even though I haven't got a vote on this, I could support this scheme. And I very much look forward to the detail in the business plan as promised. In theory, this is a wonderful opportunity, but in practice, it really is a big risk and gamble, and I sincerely hope that we do well, Mr. Mayor, and we succeed. If agreed, we must all work together. We must put party politics aside, because people are looking for us to give them improvements, and we must deliver together. This also needs to be inclusive, Mr. Mayor, and not exclusive. And I mean what I mean by that, not just for the city of Cardiff, and not just for the valley areas to the north of the area we're speaking about. We must make sure we get our fair share in the Vale, and we must not miss out. And we certainly do need a strong voice for us and not be left out in the cold. And I will say we do certainly need a better transport system, because currently our privatised railways are letting us down badly, Mr. Mayor. And I hope that the Metro will help us in that effect. Buses are owned by Cardiff Council. Take it up with your colleagues at City Hall. Labour-run council in Cardiff. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I sincerely hope it is a success given the promises are made to us tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Next speaker is Councillor Marnie.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have great reservations on this. Some of my points echoing points that have already been made, in some ways, unfortunately, but in other ways to reinforce what's being said. I don't really feel this is the huge deal that's been struck to the public or presented to the public in this £1.2 billion city deal super region sort of thing. It's already been explained that the vast majority of this money is being used on the so-called metro transport system. Well, yeah, I'm sure we're all in favour of upgrading transport facilities. However, surely that's the not prerogative, but the duty of the UK government, the Welsh government, and the franchise holders who are operating these, rather than local authorities such as ourselves. Some of the figures that have been bandied around, I'm working them out myself this afternoon also, is that basically, once you take the metro system out of things, we are talking of a net receipt to be spent amongst 10 councils of £19 million a year. That's even if that was split equally in projects, £1.9 million extra per year. And in fact, that actually sinks to about the £13 or £14 million mark between the 10 councils if borrowings and spending is brought forward and we in fact hit the higher contribution rate of all councils, in our case £18 million. Again, it's already been alluded to. I would be delighted if that brought in £4 billion of private investment, but that doesn't seem likely to me on these figures. We also know that this council has, as I point out every single year, an appalling record of fighting for the rights and finances of this council compared with other councils in the block grant from the Welsh Assembly. So why would we think we're going to be any more successful with that record on getting a fair deal on this? We've heard mention of creative accountancy. I'm reminded of an incident several years ago when I was watching television and saw Jane Hutt, then Cabinet Minister for Health for Wales, announce £100 million plus new investment in the health service. I remarked out loud, oh, that's got to be good. My two brothers, who were present in the room, burst out laughing, both senior accountants within the health service, and said that she'd announced that 6 times over the last 18 months, but announced it in a different way each time to give the impression that it was new money every time. We've had the expression creative accountant. I would say smoke and mirrors. Basically, what we're getting here is a share of £19 million split between 10 councils every year. And we have to fight for that share of it. We've been told today that the metro scheme won't be coming if we don't agree to this. That's nothing short of blackmail, quite frankly. Why shouldn't we have decent transport links? Why shouldn't the UK government be paying for this? Why shouldn't the Welsh Assembly be paying for this? Why shouldn't the transport companies be paying for this? I mean, we've heard on the bullet points here, grandiose things, coordinate transport planning and investment. What does that mean? Of course you've got to do that. Support innovation, improving the digital network. We're sounding like the thick of it here now. Develop a skilled workforce and training. We're doing that, aren't we? Aren't we supposed to be doing that? Supporting enterprise and business. What does that mean? You've just made this up. It's just words. It really is the thick of it. All for 90. We could be committing ourselves to quite some future financial strictures here on the back of this for the sake of £19 million a year split between 10 councils. We've mentioned the transfer of powers. We are possibly putting the future of this council, which again is constantly put forward that we're the best or second best performing council in Wales, in the hands of some of the worst performing councils in Wales. So I do have grave reservations. I may have to vote in favour of this on the basis of that we can get out of it after 5 years, but of course we're also reminded that we will take a financial hit for doing that. But I can't help thinking, if the public really knew these boiled down figures of £19 million a year extra, maximum, split between 10 councils, they wouldn't be quite as enthusiastic as the papers and the pronouncements from the various councils have been convincing them to be. Thank you.
Yeah. Next speaker, Councillor John Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll probably be pleased to know that I'm not going to go through the report point by point.
Thank you.
I think we've already had it well explained by the leader, and I thank the leader for the briefing session and the managing director for the briefing session which the group leaders had, and also, although I wasn't able to come tonight, the briefing session for all members tonight. As everybody said, it's not without its risks, but I think just looking at the report, it's quite obvious that the benefits do very much outweigh the risks, and for that reason I can't see any reason not to support this. It's a good opportunity. The Vale of Glamorgan, in having the enterprise zone at St Athan and the airport, which are controlled by Welsh Government in our area, means that we're quite likely to get a reasonable amount of this money being spent in the area, or more likely than perhaps some other authorities, even though that's not the point of it. The point of it is an area-based thing and creating jobs within the area which are available to people in the Vale of Glamorgan. So I'm very much in favour of supporting this, and I don't think we should be going into it with the thought that, oh, we can vote for it tonight because we've got the option to get out in 5 years' time. It's a long-term thing, and we need to be going into it looking to make it work, and make it work over the 20-25-year period. So that's really all I got to say. Is I support the proposals and look forward to seeing it creating benefits in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Thank you. Next speaker is Councillor Jeff James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I do recognise that members have concerns, and we've heard that already. But I feel now's the time to consider the balance of the concerns and the advantages. And I hear what Councillor Marnie says about, oh, well, it's only 19 million spread over 10 authorities. One of the great advantages I think that might come out of this is that the Vale of Glamorgan doesn't benefit from some of the advantages of the other area in terms of European funding, doesn't benefit from being the capital city of Wales, and yet we do have the same needs. We still need a better transportation system. We need better job creation. We need a better link to the airport. We need a better link to the M4. None of these things we can do on our own. These are things that we've got to work with others to do. And the fact that we've got a link through to Westminster Government, to the Welsh Government, and to 10 councils working together, is the risks of that are far outweighed with the possibilities. And the possibilities, therefore, are great in that respect. Yeah, I do have questions, and I'd be happy to put one, but I don't want to put it by way of a negative impact on this. There will need to be accountability. There's the reference to that in the report, but clearly accountability is sometimes not just members of a scrutiny committee. Sometimes there needs to be more detailed scrutiny. And one of my questions will be that if Cardiff are the managing authority, who will audit the managing authority? That's an important one. I'm not talking about members, I'm talking professionals. And where will that accountability report go to? So, I mean, there are practical things, but we have 10 authorities working together. And I think that the Vale of Glamorgan could get 2 and 2 could make more than 4. It could make 5 or more. And that's why I think that the possibilities here are much better for us. I mean, I think every authority's got to make the decision based on what they think is best for them. I mean, we do not have the advantages of funding. In the case of Cardiff, they have much more advantage in terms of the viability of development than we do. But if we work together, can the Vale of Glamorgan get the kind of investment that it needs in infrastructure, in transportation, and that brings more job creation, benefits the airport, it's a no-brainer. And I will be supporting it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Frank, you're back. I thought you missed your turn then. You're next.
Thank you very much. I'm concerned that the Treasury will in fact be calling the tune with these projects. Now, some say that other councils might steal a march on us and might not play fair, that we will be marginalised. People have quoted our past record. But it seems to me the whip hand will be held by the UK government, and they will totally dominate. The UK government, Councillor James might think is great, but it has proved to be an unmitigated disaster for Wales over the last 50 years and more. That little comment might actually illustrate why the Conservatives are so much in favour of this scheme, because it gives so much power to the Treasury and to Westminster, and takes power from Wales. Okay? Great. Yes. I also fear that although this is termed a regional development scheme, I worry it is going to be only Cardiff focused. I think well, I don't think, we know it's going to be driven by the demands of the Treasury, and they will not pay regards to some areas that are underdeveloped. They will focus purely on the honeypot, shall I say. So this leads me to consider that there will be very little development north of Tufts Well, that the very little development in the Vale, apart from the airports, and along the M4 belt. Economic development, that is. And I look at page 39, which doesn't say much, but it says a lot as well, if you read between the lines. It says there will not be a Dinas Powys bypass, for instance. It says the town of Barry will benefit very little. But it's as plain as a pikestaff that with the focus on the airport and aerospace, with 5 Mile Lane being reconstructed, that there will be clearly a direct link up the Ely Valley to Junction 34, which has been raised many a time and defeated many a time, but I think this will put the seal on it. There will be a direct link up to Junction 34. Now, if that's people's intention, fine. Well, okay. I look forward to the Conservatives saying that in their manifesto, and I look forward to Colonel Treharne, and I look forward to you saying that proudly. Please do, gentlemen. I'll print the leaflets for you. Yes, but it clearly. Oh, well,
We'll tell your fellow Tories that in Dinas Powys.
Would you like to stand up and say that again?
Councillors, can I please remind you of the protocol? You are not to shout across the floor. This is not Westminster Parliament. We behave ourselves much better than that, but I do expect people to come through me as the chair of this meeting and not to have conversations going across the floor. It's totally unhelpful to everybody. Give the respect to the Speaker, whether you agree with them or not. Carry on, Councillor Franks. You've got a minute left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're very generous. I think it's clear to say that the Conservatives say that link road would be better than the Dinas Powys bypass, and I'm grateful for your honesty, Conservatives. So it's clear to me that this is not the grand scheme that we're being told about. There's no proof at all that there's going to be £4 billion of private investment. No indication what type of categories of industry that will attract such development. We are being offered a fairly mediocre amount of money over 20 years, repayable over 25 years. It's something basically to shut us up. And the UK Treasury will have the total whip hand from start to finish, and most people in this chamber appear to be quite happy to abdicate their responsibility and have everything handed up to the man in Westminster who apparently knows best. Yeah. Thank you.
Next speaker is Councillor Gwyn John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't intend to talk too long because most of it's been said already this evening, but I support Councillor John Thomas's comments and Councillor Jeff James. I think the opportunities here, particularly for the Western Vale, we've got the enterprise zone and the airport, and quite honestly, the transport links are appalling. And I'm sure that we will benefit, because if RAF St Athan is going to benefit at all, it needs transport links, and it also needs jobs, and the only investment down there will be made once we get the transport links. So quite simply, when we get these transport links, we'll have companies moving into St Athan, and that's a priority for the Western Vale. I mean, some people might not think that, but quite honestly, having worked at St Athan when there was 14,000 people working there, not like today, scattered, quite honestly, I feel that it's vital for people in the Western Vale, particularly with the threat of the Aberthaw Power Station may close in the near future. It's vital that we regenerate the business in the Western Vale particularly, and I'm supporting this tonight because I fully support the comments of Councillor James and Councillor Thomas this evening, and so do the Lamprey First Independents. We're all on board to support this tonight. I understand there are concerns over on my right from Plaid and points that have been raised, but I think we cannot afford to be out of it. You know, you have to be in it to win it. And quite honestly, unless I put the confidence in the representative of this council on this joint working agreement, on this committee, of this cabinet, to really fight our corner. And that's what it's all about. I'm not frightened about valley communities. I'm not frightened about them. I was on Ceuta, and quite honestly, I was the cuckoo in the nest, let's say, when I was on Ceuta, because it was the only independent there. But I expressed my views. It didn't always go down well with some people, but I feel very strongly that I would put confidence in our representative on that cabinet committee to get the very best for the Vale of Glamorgan. Because let's be fair, as the top county in Wales, we can be the top county in this. There's no doubt about that. So I fully support Mr.
Thank you. Next speaker is the Deputy Leader, Councillor Liz Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Vale of Glamorgan Council is absolutely no stranger to collaboration. A recent report to Cabinet showed that we've already got existing collaborations with 7 out of the 9 other local authorities in the region. So what's actually different to what we're talking about now, apart from the money from the UK government? Well, in the past, as we've heard, we've had Ceuta, we've had Suda, we've had Susbug, we've had Elskip, and a range of others. But the strategic framework and the shared vision of the city deal takes collaboration to a whole new level. And that's what makes the difference for people and organisations outside the local authority bubble. Further education, higher education and businesses are excited by the possibility of 10 local authorities working constructively together and the opportunities that that brings. At a recent event, the question I was asked repeatedly was, are the local authorities really collaborating effectively? And I was there with a number of other local authorities, and I said, well, just take a look this evening. We were actually having constructive discussions. The city deal will have a framework within which all projects will fit, and that will also help us to communicate the overall aims of the initiative to all people in South East Wales. I agree it's tempting to want a list of specific projects to add a degree of certainty to discussions, or perhaps more negatively to see if we've got our bit or if we're losing out to other areas. This scarcity mentality is often associated with disadvantage or small struggling enterprises. It's focused solely on making sure we have a big enough slice of the cake. But I would argue that a more constructive approach is in adopting a more abundance mentality where we work together to make a bigger cake so we all get some. If the city deal succeeds, then we all succeed. I have been a bit disappointed by the contributions of some comments. I understand that in September, Plaid Cymru published their programme for opposition, and they talked about an approach, an all-Wales approach that leaves no community and no individual behind. They talked of transport fit for the 21st century, integrated public transport and the metro system. They talked about regional and strategic development plans, and they talked about wanting to pursue the creation of regional combined authorities. But then they talked about regional development agencies, one for the valleys, then for rural Wales, and then for West Wales. So it wasn't exactly no community and no individual being left behind. Tonight we've seen yet again that Plaid in the Vale has brought nothing to the table. The strategic collaboration of the city deal is as much about a belief in our communities and the people who live in them as it is about our ability to drive change and economic growth. Working together, we can remove the barriers to success facing the people of the Vale and the rest of South East Wales, such as skills, connectivity, both digital and transport, so that they can grasp the opportunities that will come along with the city deal. Their success is our success, and so I'm delighted to support this.
Next speaker is Councillor Nick Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking through the figures of the funding, I am very grateful for the largesse of Westminster with the strings attached, £500 million over 20 years. Let's compare that with other schemes. Crossrail, 15 billion. HS2, initial, 30 billion. Heathrow expansion, 17.6 billion. All guaranteed to rise and all guaranteed to be fully funded no matter what the rise. Ours, 500 million over 20 years, fixed. That's point one. So let's not get excited with the largesse here. This is Wales after all. We don't expect much, and my God, we don't get much. Now let's look at the actual way that the money is split up. The 1.222 billion. 734 for the metro, not governed by the councils. With £500 million of that, that's a good chunk coming from Welsh Government, a paltry 125 million from the UK Government, and an EDF funding which I am assured will be there no matter what, depending on Brexit. We shall see. We then have all this structure then guaranteed, supposedly, to look at £495 million over 20 years, of which we have the wonderful opportunity of investing £18 million of our money. This is based, and I brought this up earlier in the briefing, of which I was grateful for, but I still have great concerns over the actual stats here that actually go to fund, to make this document and make it work, with the Welsh Government population projections on page 37 of the report, which actually forms this debate. And it says that the Vale of Glamorgan population as of 2016 was 127,985. So 15 short of 128,000. By 2036, a generation ahead, it will rise by a magic figure of 730 people. Do you believe that? Do you believe that with our LDP? Do you believe that with the massive house growth and building that's been going on in the Vale? And do you believe that with the loss of control that we will have over our land in this scheme, where they will be going helter-skelter to build in the Vale of Glamorgan to further condemn us as a suburb of Cardiff? I contrast this with the Cardiff and Vale LHB 2009 projections, which said that Cardiff's population was due to rise by 76,000, or a 24% increase, and ours was due to rise by 24,700, a 20% increase. Now that was the LHB actually trying to gear itself up to its needs for the future. It's actually looking at its population growth and the demands that would be on its service. And yet we have here a fanciful, and I quite have to say, a ridiculous figure of a 1% estimated growth over the next 20 years for the Vale of Glamorgan. I think what this is guaranteed, Mr. Mayor, to show is that when the money is being divvied out in the future, that it'll go to the areas of growth. It says Cardiff will grow by 20%, and you know what? I believe it. Look at Craiger getting passed last night, 1,500 new houses, without any provision, I suspect, for transport or facilities or amenities. We then have Newport and Bridgend coming in at 7% and 4%. You know, and they're saying that we'll have a 1% rise. If this whole document is based on fanciful and, quite frankly, ridiculous information such as that, I just wonder where we are going with it. Now, as for the Metro, I don't see any improvements apart from the already planned improvements with signalling and electrification. I don't see any new stations. I don't see any new possibilities coming from that. We've had the Conservatives tonight let the cat out the bag, where Dinas Powys won't happen and won't help the south of Barry to actually get its population moving in and out across region. So not only is it bad for Dinas Powys, it's bad for Barry. And as we all know, the Conservatives are bad for everything. So, you know, we'll take that as a given. So, Mr. Mayor, I have to say that I have major problems with this. A 25-year scheme, 20-year scheme with 25 years of funding, and I wonder just where the actual political will be to actually gain anything for the Vale of Glamorgan that either isn't already going to happen or shouldn't already be happening with schemes already in the pipeline. Aston Martin is mentioned. Well, it's either happening or it's not. We're told it is. So why is that in here? The airport, expansion of flights and everything like that. Well, I'm sorry. That's the business for them to actually achieve. Arriva trains. Well, at last we're seeing slight improvements, but they don't need our money to do that. They're a private firm that has been making money hand over fist and has now been literally forced into making improvements. And I like to think that in the fullness of time we will have a nationalised rail service for South Wales within the hands of Welsh Government. Thank you.
Well done, Nick. Thank you. Well done. Next speaker is Councillor Chris Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm grateful. I thank the Managing Director and the Leader for their presentations. No long speeches from me. I'm reminded, you'll be grateful, I'm reminded of our dear departed friend Phil Clark, who was alone in this council in wanting us to link up with Cardiff when we talked about that some time ago. And we used to argue with him at the pub after the full council meetings as we did. And he was always in favour of the big picture, the bigger picture. And he thought us linking up with Cardiff would give him that. He was a good man, Phil. He was a down-to-earth guy. And he was thinking of the bigger picture, and I think he's right. It's not the same thing, I know, but I think it's a bigger picture, and that's where we should be going. And I support it. Thank you.
Next speaker, Councillor Peter King.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues. I almost echo the same words about looking at the bigger picture. There's been some concern expressed tonight about the Westminster Treasury controlling things. Well, of course, they've never done that before, and I don't suppose they ever would again. Realistically, we are actually spelling out an investment over a period of time that we might not otherwise secure. So I think on balance, looking at the bigger picture, with austere times continuing, that has more pluses than it has minuses. Metro, this is what I'd like to talk about more than anything else. I have a seat on the at the moment Shadow Regional Transport Authority. If this goes ahead, then it may actually start to do something a little bit more tangible. The biggest part of this deal is about transport links, and what we know from other parts of the country and in Europe and around the world is that investment and transport are inextricably linked. You just can't avoid it. Where the transport goes, commercial enterprise will follow, jobs will follow, and yes, houses as well. And it may help some of our colleagues a little bit further north of here gain access to jobs, but it may also help them attract their own internal investment. There was also talk about bypasses. It's a bit of a bane in my life at the moment, but there's a rule that we all know, and that is that work expands to fill the available time, and there's a similar one about cars expand to fill the available tarmac. If we don't start to move our mode of transport, if we don't start to get people away from roads, we'll just fill them. No matter how much you can tarmac the entire country, we'll fill it. So what we're going to try and do is to try and encourage people to use a different mode of transport. So if we don't invest in that transport, I rather agree with you that it ought to be perhaps done by the franchisee, but they haven't. And they're not likely to. Now, the way that the Regional Transport Authority and the Welsh Government are looking at doing it is specifying the amount of money and saying to the bidders, you tell us what you can provide for your money, for that money. And it's up to us to steer and make that work. So I certainly support this tonight's, the recommendations tonight. I urge everyone else to, but then it's up to all of us to play our part to make these things work.
Next speaker, Councillor Clive Williams. Peter.
I think Cardiff's the fastest growing city in the UK. Now, Cardiff's also 5 times the size of the Vale, residence-wise. There will be ongoing concerns and problems, but I'm sure that these can be attacked as they arise. I fully support this because, quite simply, I don't think we can afford to be outside it. And that's for the future of the Vale of Glamorgan. Thank you.
And the last speaker that's indicated is Councillor Mark Wilson, and then I'll bring the leader back in to answer the questions that have been asked.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. The reason why I'm speaking about this is because I think the great thing about these local authorities getting together is basically we're going to have what we call synergy between them all. And if you've ever been to somewhere like Manchester, where you've got the Greater Manchester Transport Authority, and you've got the authorities all working together very well, you can see the huge economic growth that's occurred in Manchester. And I think that transport is the key driver of this. And I think that will act as a catalyst for further investment. And I think clearly the Vale will benefit from that. As a regular public transport user myself from Penarth, I've already seen some of the benefits already of the new Platform 8, if you've been to it. And I think there'll be more and more investment in that way. But we can only do that if we're united together and working on this. I'm disappointed with some of the comments made by some of our members, because I know they're bigger than that. And really, I think, Dinas Powers has an awful lot to benefit from this, actually. And I can see the real benefits of having an integrated transport system. And it will benefit not just Dinas, but Barry, the Western Vale and Penarth. So I really recommend that we go along with this project.
Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Clearly, I've not changed my mind, but I'd like to go through some of the issues that have been raised. Councillor Johnson talks about their bold claims. They may be bold claims, but if you don't have a bold claim, there's nothing to aim for. I think we need to aim for that. But one of the things that also I was disappointed with is that he seemed to think that the goalposts should be easy or straightforward. I don't think they should. I think they have to be challenging. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. But the other thing that I was surprised at and actually disappointed at was the fact that you seem to be talking down private sector investment and in fact the ability to increase the number of jobs, and I think some of your colleagues have actually sort of echoed that, and I think that's particularly disappointing. I think you've talked down what we're hoping to achieve. You said it was rushed. It wasn't rushed at all. We've had 2 reports. We've had a report to council. It's been developed over the last 16 months. There's been a tremendous amount of work go forward. So I'm somewhat disappointed in that, and I think that unless we have proper goals, then we're not going to go forward anyway. In terms of Councillor Burton, yeah, I'm glad you're supporting it. I know you can't vote for it, but maybe you also realise that the bus is in avail not only from Cardiff. But there you are. Councillor Mahoney doesn't think it's such a great deal. He talks about the fact that the net receipt is £19 million per year, only £1.9 million per council per year, of a 4 billion, and looking for 4 billion private investment. What you have to realise is even if it's £1.9 million for 20 years, that's £38 million, and we're putting in 17.9. So the ratio is even 2 to 1 even then. If you, well, you will get. Well, you will get. The point is, this is not about us. This is not. But this is not about us. This is about the region, and I think it is a deal which we wouldn't have unless we worked together, and I think it's important that we do. John, thank you. I take your point. Yeah, and one of the most important points is we do have the enterprise zone here, we do have the airport here, and I do think also that we'll have a reasonable amount to spend. And again with Jeff, yes, there are risks, but the benefits way outweigh them. Accountability, then there is accountability in terms of areas. You talked about where's the accountability, where's the audit and things. Well, there's going to be, as I said, the Assurance Committee, and the Assurance Committee is going to have to go through the stringent checks and balances, so that's going to be there, but there's still going to be the scrutiny, and I hope that every member is going to be scrutinising exactly what's coming on. One of the things that I'm not sure if I said was one of the things that we have to do in terms of the City Deal Joint Committee is there has to be an animal report, and there has to be an animal report from the Assurance Committee too. So that's something that you can hang your hat on. You can see what's happened, you can review it, you can scrutinise it. So that's the important point, I think, too. In terms of, I was surprised, Chris, you know, you made it political. I hope we wouldn't make it political. You talked about little development above the M4, or you said little development apart from above the M4. And then you said, oh, well, you know, we don't want the M4 link, and it won't come. I remind you that Ian Wynne-Jones was the one who pulled it last time, which would have benefited us in the region. If you remember, I remember because I was the deputy leader at the time, and I called him in and said, look, please don't do this. He did the same thing to us in terms of the Penarth link too, and actually made us pay all the money back, which I thought was unreasonable considering it was their scheme anyway. So, you know, and it says there's nothing in here about Barry, or you talked about page 39. What you actually did was, you know, reading between the lines. Reading between the lines means making it up. Alternative facts. Alternative facts. It's not called reading the report. He told me he was reading between the lines. So fake news. Exactly. How much, you know, Nick, you know, you said how much we're going to get and how much is Crossrail. Well, the point is, unless we go for this, we ain't going to get anything. So, and you said we don't get too much in Wales and we don't do so much in Wales. Again, talking down Wales. Well, you are. But you are. But you are. As far as I'm concerned, you are. You talked about also about the rising population being something, so that you said, so you said that those of areas of growth are going to get more. Well, that's not part of it, because if you look at the appraisal criteria on I can't see the page, but 3.6 of the report, it talks about the appraisal criteria are connecting the region, supporting innovation, improving digital networks, developing skills workforce, supporting enterprise and business growth, housing development, regeneration. It doesn't say if you have more people, you're going to get more, because you're not. You're not. It doesn't matter whether the population goes up or not. The point is, this is going to have to go through the assurance plans. It has to go through the joint committee, and the business plan has to be agreed by every council. If you think Cardiff is getting too much, you don't agree the business plan. And the business plan goes back to the joint committee, and they start again if necessary. So it has to be a business plan proven on the rationale of where you're going. So I don't accept that. Chris, I take your point about the big picture, but so did Plaid Cymru, because they wanted the regional development too. Investment, Peter's absolutely right, and so is Mark in terms of infrastructure. Manchester was the first model. It's not the only model, but one of the things that they've got in Manchester is the integrated transport. And as a result of that, you have nodal points at the end of the areas. And if you have a nodal point at the end of the area, you have business. And if you have business, you have employment. And if you have employment, then you either have the employment for the people who live there, but if people don't live there, they can still get to work. And that's what it's all about as far as I'm concerned. And again, Clive, thank you for the comments. So as far as I'm concerned, I think this is a plan on which we need to go forward. If we don't, we're going to lose out. But the point is, there are risks, there are balances, there are checks, and I think we have to go forward with this. So, Mr. Mayor, I will again reiterate the recommendations I put forward.
Thank you, Leader. Recommendations were moved and seconded. We've been asked to have a recorded vote, so we'll move to that vote now. Councillor Burton's leaving the room because he's not allowed to vote. Okay.
Okay, councillors, so for or against the motion. Councillor Aviat. Councillor Bennett.
For the motion.
Councillor Bird.
For the motion.
Councillor Brooks.
For the motion.
Councillor Burnett.
For the motion.
Councillor Cox.
For the motion.
Councillor Curtis.
For the motion.
Councillor Drake.
For the motion.
Councillor Drysdale.
For.
Councillor Egan.
For.
Councillor Franks.
Against.
Councillor Hacker.
For the motion.
Councillor Hamilton.
For the motion.
Councillor Hartree. Councillor Hodges.
Against.
Councillor James.
For the motion.
Councillor John.
For the motion.
Councillor Johnson. Fred Johnson.
For the motion.
Councillor Ian Johnson. Councillor Kelly Owen.
Sorry, I am a bit deaf tonight. For the motion.
Councillor King.
For the motion.
Councillor Marnie. Councillor Ann Moore. Councillor Neil Moore.
For.
Councillor Parker.
Strongly for.
Councillor Penrose. Councillor Preston. Councillor Probert. Councillor Riley. Councillor Roberts. Councillor John Thomas. Councillor Ray Thomas. Councillor Traherne. Councillor William. Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Clive Williams. Councillor Chris Williams. Councillor Eddie Williams.
For the motion.
Councillor Wilson.
For the motion.
Right, the result of that recorded vote was there were 34 members in favour and 5 against. Quite clearly, that is carried.